The stakes are the stakes of human freedom, which depends upon a view of human nature and the government that's appropriate to that. The greatest political science started with the classics when they began to study the regimes. And the worst of all the kinds of regimes is tyranny. The rule is in the interest of the ruler. And that means that the others are held by force. They're in greater or lesser states of rebellion all the time. In the 20th century, a new word was invented for tyranny. They called it totalitarianism. In the Soviet Union, what happens, right? Your kids have to go to school. If they don't, you're arrested. But then what are they taught in school? They're taught to inform on you. People live in terror of their own children because the children are young, right? And they can't. And so they go to school and they hear, authoritative things. And you'd be afraid to tell the children not to believe what's in school, because how can you trust a 10-year-old not to repeat what you said? And to the extent that you can teach them things like that, you are depriving them of their childhood. That's totalitarianism. I don't myself think that it's really different in principle than ancient tyranny, which is also at war with human nature. The classic books raise the question, how can a tyrant perpetuate himself? Because they don't last very long, these tyrannies. People don't like them. And a famous story repeated by Aristotle, that they do it by lopping off everything tall, everything excellent, everything superior. A tyrant stands in a field of grain and lops off all the top higher heads of grain. In that point, you can't have friendship, you can't have philosophy, you can't have faith, because those are all things that look both closer inside the human being, not just to the tyrant, and look above the tyrant too. And Hitler and Stalin, just like, the great Greek tyrants and the Roman ones, they suppress everything private and everything high. Except now what changes is the scale is so much bigger. And it becomes plausible that you could actually remake the world. And then the use of technology makes it ever more potentially intense. About 60 million people were killed in the war, about half of them soldiers, sailors, and airmen, and about half of them civilians. That's 3 times as much as the First World War. The body count is just massive. There are big reasons why the war is so severe for civilians. First of all, because technology and accumulated wealth make it possible to wage a more total kind of war even than was waged in the First World War, which was incredibly terrible and unprecedented. And then the second thing is there was a mass-produced, organized effort to murder people, whole categories of people, whole races of people, whole professions of people. Nobody had ever seen anything like that before. There's an organized attempt at mass slaughter. That's totalitarianism. One of the most articulate, and to my mind, finest human beings who ever lived was Winston Churchill, who was a friend of freedom, parliamentary democracy, freedom under a constitution, freedom with restraint. Every person, he loved to quote, can live by no man's leave beneath the law, however humble that person is born. The government is to be accountable to the people. Churchill said that there's always 2 options. Are the people going to belong to the government, or is the government going to belong to the people? He just repeated that all his life. And he thought that these great totalitarian tyrannies, which he thought that the extremist movements in his own country, including the Socialist Party that he opposed all his life and was beaten by in 1945, echoed in a milder form the same thing as these tyrannies. Because they too had this sort of notion that we can perfect the society if we just assemble more power in the people who lead it. So it is a great contest, and it's confused between these two ways of looking at the world, right? And they really do amount to whether you have a picture of the human soul that it's free and therefore entitled to govern itself, which means never to be governed except with its consent, different then from horses and dogs and all the things that we use for pets, or this view that no, in the end we're collective beings shaped by history, and now we're going to appoint some of us to get in control of the effort to shape history. And so the stakes are the stakes of human freedom, which depends upon a view of human nature and the government that's appropriate to that. And that battle still goes on.
Thank you for watching. We hope you're enjoying our highlight series and invite you to explore our complete course on the Second World Wars. All of Hillsdale College's online courses are free and for everyone who loves to learn.